Hello people! So today we're going to be working on some painting techniques, but we're actually going to apply them directly to our painting. So if you see this tiny little piece of paper, this is going to be our painting techniques. In each area it says what goes where, but we have to remember that for the most part, each of these painting techniques needs to have a base color underneath. So let's go ahead and just start putting some base colors down. So wet on wet is direct color mixing, and blend is color mixing also, but you show the original color and then the two that you're mixing together. So these two we can do right away, but these other painting techniques, including sgraffito, stippling, sponging, things like that, and dry brush, need to have a base color down. So let's talk about blending. So when you're doing your global foods, you need to make sure that whatever the outside color of your food is, the background is going to be the complementary color to that. So let's talk about what that looks like on a color wheel really quickly. Let's bring this up. We need the document camera catch up. Alright, so what this looks like is you have purple, complementary color is yellow, and yellow is purple. They both make each other brown. Green and red are complementary colors. When they're mixed together, they make brown. And then orange and blue, not teal, orange and blue are complementary colors as well. So if you have an orange, your background needs to be blue. If you have a lemon, it needs to be purple. If you have an eggplant, it needs to be yellow, that sort of a thing. So since we're doing a pear, ours needs to be red. So it doesn't just have to be straight up red. You can add a little bit of purple in there, a little bit of orange in there, but the main thing is that it's the primary color. So before we get started, I also want to point out that down here it says blend for shadow. So I want to show that part to you first before we get into this base of blending. So since I'm doing a green pear, I want to start out by just painting straight up complementary color. But I'm going to blend in the background. So why am I doing this? Because I want to add that shadow first. I want to make sure I don't forget about it, I don't lose it. You're doing a physical object, it needs to have a shadow underneath of it. So this little like ragged edge that I drew is pretty much where the shadow of this pear should be. So I'm going to paint this in, and I can still see through this red because the red's pretty thin. So I'm painting that. And it's okay if you get it on the table. We'll go wipes later, just like normal. I'm going to paint in that base color, just like that. It's pretty sloppy, that's fine. So now I'm going to come back and I'm going to take my green. Because the green's a complementary color, that's the whole reason we're doing red, because we have a green pear. And I'm actually going to put it directly on top of this red. And in doing so, and putting it directly on top, notice how it's turning this almost like purpley, blackish brown. So if you use just straight up brown, it wouldn't look nearly as consistent, as good. It would just look like you put brown on top. But when you add green, it makes it a lot more of a smooth transition between those colors. So I'm going to come right up here close to it. And then again, I can see my edge of where my shadow goes. And what I'm doing right now is actually a wet on wet, just like what we're going to do up here. Color mixing. So I'm getting my complementary color again, putting it right on top, and making sure I do all of that shadow. The shadow doesn't have to be perfect, because you're just showing that there is, in fact, a shadow. So super easy shadow, and now we can keep going with our blended background. So I washed out my paintbrush, blotting it off, and I can keep going. So back here in this background, I don't have to be super specific about how I'm painting, since I'm painting the background first, because I'll wind up painting over all of these shapes and getting a nice smooth line. That's one of the reasons Mrs. Hollis and I are always telling you to paint in the background first, so that when you paint it, you don't have to be so perfect about it, because you're going to paint over it anyway with your final food object. So just like that, I'm going to fill it in, and then see what happens next. I paint that in, just like that. And then I can take another color, add a little bit of purple here, I can blend it in with it. Make it a little bit darker on the edges if I want to. If I wanted to add the green instead, I could add the green. Make it a little bit darker also. Just like that. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is your background. You're going to cover up a lot of it later on with those foods. There we go. Bring a little bit on the edges. Now we'll do the other side. Okay, so I have that filled in, and then I can make it a little bit darker. Again, up here. I want to make sure I'm pretty consistent on both sides, so it doesn't look kind of weird. But I'm blending for that background. Show a little bit on the sides here. Just like that. A little bit on the sides. I don't necessarily like how that looks, so I can paint it out, because it's paint, so it's super forgiving. Okay, so I know I'm moving all over the place here. Let's fix this. There we go, now it's fixed. Okay, so I have that basics right now. Everything's base painted. I've done some blending, and now I can start adding in some more stuff. So I want to make sure that I'm painting from what's farthest back, so like these stems and this pear first, before I move on to anything else. So let's watch and see. Taking this, I know that with Sgraffito I need another color to be underneath it. So I'm going to take some of that. I might actually switch to a smaller paintbrush to do that, to do that stem. Just like that. And if I want to, since I have this color, I can already come into these areas and I can look, well, I've got 3 of these, so I'm going to paint all 3 of them before I go any further. Just like that. And then for brown, if you're trying to talk about a complementary color, browns typically have a lot of reds in them, so I like to use green as a complementary color for brown. So I put this on there. And I'm just going to take it and I'm just doing a line, like a stripe. And then I can just kind of mix that stripe in. And there you go, I made a shadow. Like, that's all I have to do. Just made a stripe of color. So again, taking a little bit of that green, doing a stripe down, and I just mix that stripe in. Shadows go on the bottom where the sun can't reach, or whatever your light source is. And then if you're trying to do a highlight on top, wash out your paintbrush. Take a little bit of white, and then just do a thin line on the opposite side, and then you made yourself a highlight. Don't overthink it. Go. Sometimes if you still have wet paint when you're making that highlight, it'll transfer onto it. Totally fine. So I'm just drawing like a white line, just like that. Ta-da! I made a highlight. Woo! Okay, so leaves. First Sgraffito. Washing out my paintbrush. Put you here. Drying it off. So I see that this says Sgraffito because I want to show those veins. So when I carve with the back of my paintbrush and I show that line, I want the darker color to be on the bottom and the lighter color to go on top. So mixing those complementary colors up, a little bit of brown, a little bit of green. And I'm painting that dark brownish green directly on here. But remember, I'll put another color on it later on, and then we'll scratch below to reveal this layer. Like that. So, made that darker. Ooh, I've got some more leaves, so I can use this direct color that I have now and paint right on top. I have that. I don't have to be super neat because I'm going to paint on top of that later on, because I'm painting what's farthest away first. Now I do want to make sure that these 2 leaves have a different color since they're overlapping each other. So I'm going to go a little bit lighter here. And then paint that in. And there you go. You've got my leaves. I'll sgraffito on top later on. It won't be nearly as blackish dark. We'll see what that looks like. Alright, so this one says blend and dry brush. So this little part right here is talking about making an actual highlight for your blend. So I'm going to think about what color an actual pear is. It's green with a little bit of white and a touch of yellow. So I'm working on mixing that color right now for myself. And then once I'm happy with it, I can start using it. So I'm mixing, and I'm not loving the color I'm making right now. I'm not gonna lie. So mixing it right there. I think that's a little bit better. If your color is too bright, again, add the complementary color. It makes your life so easy. So now I have a lot of this color, and whenever you're mixing a color, you want to actually mix a little bit more than what you need. Trust me, you'll be thankful for it later. So I'm putting that down, bringing it over. You might be like, Miss Marnelli, you've got red in it. It's okay, I'll use it as a shadow. Letting it. That's why you want to use that complementary color as a background, because in case you're painting it and it's still wet, just make it into a shadow. Like, I'll blend that in, just like that. Right here. Right down there. Just like that. Alright, so now it said that we were supposed to blend for it, and then we're going to do dry brush later on once this is all dry. So let's go ahead and see how to do that. I'll change the exposure for you guys a little bit, because I know it's super wet right now, so it's really hard to tell. Okay, so a little bit of white, highlight. So if I notice, I put this light source coming from over here now. That's where I put my highlight. So I'm actually, instead, I'm going to put it over here. So I can paint it directly on. So see how I made it kind of skinny there, thicker, and I followed the actual shape. I can do it like that, or I can come and blend this in around it. So I can put that white directly on it like we did for the stems, or I can blend it in. And I can even layer some of those highlights. So maybe I want it to be even brighter. Go for it. Layer that highlight, blend it in a little bit. Go for it. Maybe there's a little bit of a highlight on this side. Just a little bit of one. Totally fine. Right there. Just like that. So there's a blended highlight. Didn't have to do much work for it. If I even wanted to come in and make a little bit of a shadow, I'm going to actually mix those two colors, my complementary color a little bit more into the color that I pre-made, and then I'll just paint it a little bit in right there. There we go. I have my complementary colors. No worries. Okay. So let's move on to our next pear shape. So this pear right here overlaps this one. So I need to do this one first. So you always work from the back of the picture slowly forward. Remember, we still haven't done all of our painting techniques on top of this. Paintings are a process. It's okay. It's fine. So, washing this out, moving on, and I'm going to start with this part back here. So I already have that color pre-mixed, and since it's a little bit darker over here, there might be a shadow, so I might want to make it a little bit darker by adding a little bit more of that complementary color. So I'm actually mixing that right off camera, mixing that together. Want a little bit more green. Okay, so now it's a little bit darker. And start by painting it in. Now, up here, I need to be a little bit more careful, so I'm not going to even use that same paintbrush. So I'm letting the paintbrush do the work here, making it that whole thickness. And this is how I get smooth paintbrush strokes. I actually put the whole paintbrush down and let the paintbrush do the work, rather than me doing short little brushy strokes. So I'm just following that line that I already created, just like that. And there you go. Then I can take one of my smaller brushes, and I can actually come in and do some of those details and not have to worry about being messy. So I'm going to pick up that color. I'm going to paint around. just like this. I see a glob of paint right here, so I'm actually just going to pick that up, put it on top, and just like that, I have the skin on the edge. So that's what that little piece is, just to show the kind of skin on it. And again, if I want to show more of a separation between these two, I can take a skinny line of my complementary color and just line it just like that. There you go. Super easy. No worries. Okay, so the inside meat of a pear. You need to think about whatever the colors are that you're using for your object. But for this one, since it's a pear, we're thinking of a little bit of brown, we're thinking of some white, and a touch of yellow. Almost like sand colors. I want to do a little more white, touch more yellow. And again, I'm mixing it off screen. Touch of purple. And if a color looks again too bright, add the complementary color. So I actually added just a touch of purple to this, like a tiny little dot, to make it the right color. So taking this, and I'm going to do long brush strokes, and I'm trying to hold it with a nail here. Long brush strokes right around that object. I'm letting the paintbrush do the work. Just like that. Then I can come in, fill this all in. If I'm worried about losing where the seeds are, I can paint around those. Just like that. There we go. Long brush strokes. So it also tells me that I'm going to do wet on wet color mixing down here, so I'll wait and do that in a little bit. And I'll show you more of what that looks like. So then under here we have a shadow, so I'm going to add a little bit more brown, or again I could use the complementary color of purple to make this a little bit darker. So I can make that shadow just like this. I'll paint that in. Okay, under here, be careful about how much water you have in your paintbrush, because that definitely affects it. And then I can paint those details in right on top. Do an overpaint, just like that. And then I can show the stem down here as an overpaint. And a lot of times at the end, when you just put like one flat color, it doesn't look nearly as nice as if you mix another color into it. So I'll just take a little bit of green, put that on top, and it makes it look like a much more finished look. Okay, so I'm going to give this some time to dry, and then we'll come back and see our last few techniques.